Hey, this is Tim Sheridan, writer for Masters of the Universe Revelation, Teen Titans Academy, Shazam, and the upcoming Batman The Long Halloween Part 1. You're listening to Spoiler Country.
Hello, listeners of Spoiler Country. Today on the show, we have the fantastic Mr. Tim Sheridan. How's it going, Tim?
Hey, it's going great now that I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, certainly fantastic. The list of what you have accomplished is definitely going under the realm of fantastic at this point. You are making a name for yourself in writing, like I said, everyone's entire childhood moving forward, or at least my adult childhood.
It really is a crazy year for me. It feels like, I've gotten the opportunity to work on a lot of stuff that comes from our childhood and sort of, revisiting that stuff. And then, but this year in particular, there's a lot of stuff coming out.
Are you purposely looking for every piece of our childhood that you have not done yet and thinking, you know what, I need to do that one as well? I mean, is there like a Mighty Max coming, a Gargoyles, a G.I. Joe coming from you?
like when I think about it, I'm like, oh no, of course not. I just, do what comes my way. But that's not true, because I will sit here and think, and I have pitches for like what the things are, what I would do with certain brands and certain properties and things that I've loved all my life. And so, I don't actively go out and try to, hoard all of these great things from our childhood. But I've been so lucky that I've had the opportunity to get to add my voice to the ongoing legacy of those things. It is a really, the gratitude I feel is immense. So
looking back at little Tim Sheridan, what were you watching or reading as a kid that either made you want to be a writer, or thought to yourself, this is what I'm going to mirror myself after? Was there anything like that?
Yeah, I did. I was thinking about this. I'm glad you asked this. I was thinking about this because I was thinking about how when people say who the writers were, or the artists, or the storytellers that inspired them, that direct or a direct connection to the thing they do now, and you, for me at least, I only have that sort of clarity on the thing now when I look backwards. Like when I was a kid, I never was sitting there thinking, oh, well, I'm loving Denny O'Neil and Marv Wolfman, and therefore that's inspiring me, and I will go on to do things like them. Like, it's only now in retrospect and I look back and I'm like, oh, my entire philosophy on story and what I do is rooted in the stuff that I read from Denny O'Neil and from Marv Wolfman and George Perez and Frank Miller, and when I'm talking about comics, and then Transformers. When I was a kid, when Transformers the movie came out, the animated movie, that was a monumental thing for me. At the time, I knew it was important because I loved it, and I ran to Douglas Drug every weekend to their video rental section to re-rent it again. You couldn't buy movies back then; it was too expensive. So I would re-rent it every single weekend and watch it over and over and over again after it came out on video. And so I knew it was important to me, but I didn't know why. And now, in retrospect, I look back and I say, "Oh, that movie was a kids' movie," But it taught me that sometimes the good guys don't win. It taught me about consequences and stakes, and it's not even just that the good guys don't win. Sometimes the bad guy wins. And what does that mean? And sometimes your heroes fall. And that's a big thing, I think, for a kid who hadn't really been exposed to that, to sort of come to grips with. And so those things really, really are the building blocks of Batman comics, Transformers, from toys to all the entertainment. Those were the things that when I was a young kid, G.I. Joe, that was the stuff when I was a young kid. But then again, I would have consumed anything. I watched cartoon wise. Here's an enigma. I also was crazy about Gem and the holograms.
I remember that.
I would watch. What's that?
Yes, I remember Gem.
Yeah, Jen is truly outrageous. Like I would watch that. I remember watching Care Bears. Like I couldn't get enough Care Bears for some reason. I still to this day sing the Gummy Bears, Disney's Adventures of the Gummy Bears theme
That's
song,
awesome.
like, all the time, constantly, to the annoyance of everyone around me. And so it's amazing the stuff that I would have consumed anything in animation as a kid, and I did, and I loved it. And in comics, when I was young, I was really into Iron Man and Batman, mostly Batman. And then as I got older, I got exposed to Superman comics. The first Superman comics I ever bought that I ever really got into was Reign of the Supermen, that story arc right after the death of Superman. And then, fast forward, many years later, I got to work on the adaptation for animation of the Reign of the Superman story. So it was a huge sort of full circle moment for me. And I got to work on it with Mike Carlin, who was the editor for Superman at DC when those books came out. And, that was like I say, the gratitude I feel is immense for the opportunities I've been afforded, and to get to work on things that I've loved my whole life, and to just sort of keep the ball in the air and lend my voice to it as well. That's how I see what I do.
I think it's fantastic to think that so many of us share a similar history as children. And I think we really grew up in the golden age of cartoons. It might be like with the quality that they were, like He-Man, Transformers, like I said, G.I. Joe. I talk about Mighty Max all the time, Batman the Animated Series. We're such a golden age. And as you're talking about Transformers the movie, I was thinking that was probably going back in my head the first time that anything had a consequence, where characters are killed, mistakes are made, things go wrong. And every other cartoon, everything always ends, everything's back to the starting point. Everything resets at the end of each episode and everything restarts again. But in Transformers, it didn't restart. Things had a definite, this is a point where these characters end.
I think about the people that made that movie. I think about Margaret Lesh, and I think about Flint Dille, and how they must have known. I've never talked to them about it, but they must have known that they were touching the stove, that they were stealing cookies, because for what they were able to sort of do with that particular movie. And because it was a movie, because it was a feature film, there was they could elevate the storytelling in a way that was, obviously really impactful for some kids, particularly this one.
I'm looking at your back and looking at the Unicron there and the Transformers poster, and
I'm looking at it right now, just thinking about it. I'm turning around looking at it.
It's absolutely awesome, and I think another great thing with that movie, talking about once again how it impacted our childhood, is that, like I said, it introduced things like our hero's journey. You have Hot Rod moving into Rodimus Prime. You have Cup, the wise sage. You have that, and even the music. I mean, I still have the music from Stan Bush on CD, and I will listen to it. I don't care. Dare is awesome.
The Stan Bush soundtrack for Transformers the movie is the ultimate workout mix. If you're going for a jog,
yes.
you put that thing on and you can do no wrong. It just pumps you up, which is amazing, because for a movie that had so many dark tones to it, story wise, the score is ultimately, and by the way, the songs from Stan Bush, but the score, is just phenomenal and pumps you up as well. So this is so much they did right with that movie that now, at this point in my life, the fact that the first Transformers project I got to work on was Transformers War for Cybertron for Netflix. I came in and worked on season 2 and season 3, and all of that show is rooted in G1, sensibility, if not flat out continuity. And I always thought, when I started working in animation, I thought someday I'll get to work on Transformers, but it's going to be a version of Transformers that isn't exactly what I grew up with. It's going to be something that is Transformers adjacent for a kid like me, but I'll still enjoy it, But then, FJ DeSanto called and said, hey, here's what we're doing, and told me the pitch for the show. And I just was beside myself. I wanted that job so badly. And because it really was right in my wheelhouse. And it was the kind of show that I wanted to exist in the world. And if there's something I can do to help make it happen, I'm there.
And I will say, having seen the War for Cybertron seasons, I think they're so respectful. I mean, I actually felt they should have, all that was missing was a scene where Agents of Destruction pops in and he blows through ship. And that's all that was missing.
It's true. Yeah.
I watched that so many times, and that for me, that was like the badass metal song when I was a kid. I was like, oh my God, I'm a badass Agent of Destruction. But
by the way, that soundtrack is not just Stan Bush songs too. Like it's, that thing's incredible. That movie's great.
It was before, I think animation was appreciated the way it is nowadays with movies. But for War of Cybertron, I think you guys, you honored the original show so well. You have a nod to the Quentin songs. You have a nod, with the Matrix, and you even make a nod with Galvatron as well. I mean, there's so many little nods to the movie we all know and the TV show we all love, and even continues into what we think the original show would be. That I think, it was a wonderful thing that you guys did.
I think, thank you. And I think without, I can't really talk much about what's coming up, and I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say this, that we only got more bold with season 3 in terms of its connection to Transformers mythology and mythologies, and I'm just so happy with what we were able to do with what Hasbro and Netflix and Rooster Teeth and everybody involved. I mean, it's for me, for a kid who grew up with Transformers and Transformers the movie, it was the job of a lifetime. I was very happy to do it, and it led to me doing some other stuff at Netflix. Right after I finished on Transformers, I started working on Masters of the Universe Revelation for Kevin Smith.
Well, before we get too much into the He-Man, I do have a couple more War for Cybertron questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, so for anyone who watched the second season, obviously there's going to be the crash. The Ark is crash landing basically on Earth. We understand what's going to be the Ark from the original G1 series. Because of that, are there still going to be Transformers that will appear that we all know that have not been in the first 2 seasons, or are you now stuck with that one crew that we have already introduced?
Yeah, I can't talk about anything with that show. But I will say that we, I think that the way we went into it. And by the way, also I have to tell you this: I haven't seen season 3 yet. I haven't seen Kingdom yet. So I really can't, I'm not even an authority. I can't even tell you what the animators were able to do. So, so it's really, I'm going to be as surprised as anyone when some fun cameos pop up that we didn't even put in the script. So we'll I'll be sitting there just like you looking for them.
Well, I definitely want to give a pitch, if you can, to introduce a pre-old Cup that can be introduced to what he was before he became like the mentor to Hot Rod, as he deserves to be.
Well, if you had just come to me a couple of years ago when we were writing the show, I would have,
See, if I had known you're going to write my child, I just would keep sending you emails like, hi, another character you need to show up is this. I'd be the most annoying freaking fan. Have you introduced Blur yet? Blur needs to be in the cartoon.
I have to tell you, though, I think sometimes it depends on the gig. Sometimes that is a thing that someone takes into consideration. And I think War for Cybertron is a good example of, one of the times when that's been the case for me in my career. FJ DeSanto, and Ted Biaselli at Netflix, they knew they wanted people who spoke the language of the fans to be there, people who were fans themselves to be there, to be that voice. I was there all the time saying, let's bring this character in, let's do this character. Obviously, in a 3D animated series, the budgetary constraints become something you have to consider. There are only so many characters you can have, and in a Transformers show, there's only so many characters you can have that you can show all of their alt modes and have them interact with everybody and in all the ways we expect when we want them to. So it's those questions come up that are above my pay grade. And sometimes I'm sitting there saying let's throw in all of these characters and they have to say, well, we're gonna have to try to rein it in a little bit.
Well, since you've done like Transformers, like you've done so much work that it has such a deep fan base to like Transformers, Masters of the Universe, Reign of Superman, some Teen Titans comic books, whatnot. When you're writing and thinking about the story, okay, how do you balance story concerns versus fan service concerns?
Well, I don't. I think that's the thing, and that's why I think on that show in particular, and I think there was a lot of this on Master of the Universe as well, because Master of the Universe was formative for me as well. We'll talk more about that later, but I don't think they wanted me to balance those concerns. I think that was the whole idea, and I'll tell you, it's not just me. On Kingdom, I wrote half of that season. The other writer who wrote the other half is a brilliant writer named May Catt, who is, to me, one of the not just foremost authorities on, but also just one of the biggest fans you'll ever find for Beast Wars. And and I don't think, if anything, I took my cues from May, who I think went in and as fan foot forward. And said, let me think about how do I see this? How would I do this as a fan first, and then adapt based on production requirements later. That's how we went into it. I mean, we did some of that on Earthrise as well. I just think that we on Kingdom, we were able to especially with May there. May was, I'm so grateful she was there, because Beast Wars was not, the Transformers I grew up with. It was the Transformers she grew up with. So, but for a show that is steeped in Beast Wars and in G1, and that it was necessary, I think, to have some folks in there who spoke those languages.
And I do wonder, as someone who is a fan like you are, and these characters as well as a child, is it daunting to write them? Because I imagine there's part of you that wants to write them as you remember them being, because that's what's in your head and you feel loyalty to what you remember. At the same time, characters do need to grow, adapt, change, and make it into a 21st century story that's kind of, a little bit more... War for Cybertron is a little bit more adult than the original was supposed to be. So the characters do have to change, but you're also trying to be respectful.
I think that's actually, I have to be honest with you, that was the easiest part of the job, because, only because the show, when you watch, the original Transformers, Transformers the movie notwithstanding, when you watch the original series, there's a lot of room for more character to get later. Those shows were designed to be very much plot centric, and there's a problem and with the Decepticons, and we're going to go and fight it, and here's how we're going to fix it, and we'll battle it out, and we'll have a clever solution to it, and maybe we'll even learn something. Like there was a machine by which that show ran, and I think that it left, and a lot of shows when I was a kid were like this, a lot of animated series, there's still a lot of room for character development. I think in terms of like what we did in Earthrise with Elita 1, Elita 1 didn't have a lot of screen time in the old show. So there wasn't an opportunity to really explore more about sort of who she is and what her motivations might be. And, there are clues and those markers that we used when we were writing Elita 1 for Earthrise, in order to keep her rooted and truthful to who she has been as a character. But, and these things have been explored in comics and other places. But, when you're looking at it strictly from the animation perspective, I think there was just a lot of room there for us to get in and layer in a lot more character beats than we would have gotten if we had been doing the show in the 80s for a younger audience. So I love what we have been able to do with Elita 1 in particular, and we did some cool stuff with Ultra Magnus and Bumblebee as well.
I think Elita 1, I think you did a great job with Elita 1 and Bumblebee. As you said, all of them, I think you did a great job. Some of us are still mourning Ultra Magnus a little bit, but just how it goes. But
listen, I always tell everybody, it's not about the day nothing happened. It's you got to, in order to understand the stakes, you have to make big sacrifices. And
what 86 movie was all about. the big sacrifice.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's also the philosophy behind the first comics I ever wrote came out earlier this year. There were Future State Teen Titans and Future State Shazam for DC. And that whole thing was all about, for me, let me show you how bad it can be for these people who put on these tights and these capes and because they care and they go out every day. And sometimes they're kids, like the Teen Titans, they go out and they care to do this. But it's so easy to, when they have superpowers, we think, that it's easy for them. And in fact, they are constantly knocking on the door of terrible consequences. And in order to appreciate that, when we're having the fun times, like we're having right now in Teen Titans Academy, we have to understand what is always lurking behind the fun, behind that door that they're always knocking on, that it is, the stakes are real. They should be real for them. The way that they were in Transformers, the movie. The reason why I love the seasons of the Transformers show that came after Transformers, the movie, isn't because they were perfect, episodes of television. It's because they benefited from all of the drama and backstory that the movie gave them, that it fed to them. And it's the same thing where, like, the Star Wars, the original Star Wars trilogy is so great because it had a history of the Clone Wars and all of this past that Vader and Obi-Wan and all of these, and the Jedi and everybody had that we didn't see at that time, but we knew existed, and it just enriched the world so much. That stuff is important, and it helps you understand the stakes.
And I agree with you 100%. I think a great, when you talk about Ultra Magnus and from the original War Cybertron, you didn't write the first season, right? You wrote the second one. Did that open?
Yeah, I came in season 2. Yeah.
When you're writing season 2, and because what Ultra Magnus' death kind of did for the first season, it did open the door that no one is safe. Every character here that you know and you love can be lost because Ultra Magnus is dead, and that means everyone can be dead. When you're writing the second season, is that something you can keep in your pocket while you're writing? You're thinking, I know that when I'm writing season 2, the viewers already know my characters are not safe, and are you purposely playing with that idea?
That is exactly why it's there, I think. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't on season 1, but when I came in, that was the effect for me. Knowing that this is not just a prequel, something that happens and we know it's going to turn out a certain way. It's something I'm doing a lot. It's again, I compare it to what I've done in comics with Future State, and now the books I'm doing. The future for me is prologue, but the future is also never set in stone. So it's even the future of War for Cybertron that we saw, which was the original G1 entertainment, to me, that stuff, may not be set in stone in the world of War for Cybertron, as we saw with Ultra Magnus, right? And with more characters in season 2. So that was definitely something that I carried with me. But the biggest thing I carried into it was I knew that one of the first scenes I was going to write was, would involve, the head of Ultra Magnus. Gavin Hignite, who's another terrific writer who I worked with on Earthrise. Right from the beginning, we were like, that Megatron would keep Ultra Magnus's head and would interact with it. and so we were like, what's that scene going to look like? And so, right. We talked about that. I think he wrote some stuff. I wrote some stuff in my first episode. And, so those are the opportunities that are presented, with something like when you have characters as bold as Megatron, you don't want to let that ball fly by,
Right. And I think, and I do wonder if that's also kind of the key of bringing in Galvatron the way you did, as a way of saying the future is not immutable. It can be changed as we go. This is a character that we're going to bring in to prove that we're not going to be, let's say, chained to the original canon.
I mean, that's, that seems to be, I didn't write that episode, but that seems to be, what is what is happening there is sort of, we're seeing that there are different ways to look at the mythology that we know, and different lenses of time that we can see them through. I don't know if that was the intention. Again, I didn't write that episode, but as a fan, I can agree with you, and I can yes and on that.
Well, I mean, and the cool thing about Transformers is that the canon and mythology that we know of for Transformers is one of those few instances, I think, where the mythology was really created as they went. Like the idea of the Matrix and some of the history background of where the Transformers came from. That's not in the original G1. I mean, there's no Matrix, there's no Quintessons. None of them exist.
Couple seasons, the first couple seasons, you're right. None of that's there. But also the AllSpark came with the live action movies, and that has really become a big part of the lore now. It's all additive. A lot of that stuff, it sort of, it's cumulative. It's cumulative. It all sort of, the stuff that people think fits into the canon, ends up sticking around for a while. The stuff that people enjoy the most. Hopefully there'll be some stuff like that from War for Cybertron.
Is there any of the canon or mythology that you were told to stick to, or are you able to dictate the canon mythology as you're writing the episodes, and what you're going to follow or not follow?
Well, I mean, I will say this is why it's great to work for somebody like FJ. It is, nobody ever put the brakes on to say you can only think of it this way, or you can only, stay within these walls of this small little box we're going to put you in. It was never like that. It was go, blow it out. Like, think of, give us everything you got, and use your imagination, draw on your fandom and and your whatever, and your instincts, and then we'll talk through it and figure out the best way to move forward and tell our story. FJ had an idea of, he had a document that showed sort of what the progression would be plot wise for Earthrise, and so we kind of knew then the rough edges of how it would shape up. But then Gavin and he just turned us loose at the planning stage, in the imagination stage. He let us run wild in that respect. And then sometimes, it's not even the producer or showrunner like FJ who says, well, maybe focus more on this and not this. Sometimes it was us. We're just, that just comes with experience. You think, well, what is this story about in this particular episode? What are we really saying? And does this part serve, where we're trying to go, knowing that we only have so much time in order to tell the story? So sometimes we can edit ourselves as we're going, and sometimes it takes a good story editor coming in and helping us sort of refine our vision. But the biggest thing I can say is, on a show like, I don't think I've ever been on a show. And this is another part of just the luck of my life and careers. I don't think I've ever been on a show where they have told me, to limit my imagination. When you go in the door, I think what they value, all the good bosses and the good producers, what they all value is somebody coming in with a lot of ideas and imagination and the knowledge, the working knowledge of the thing, especially when you're working an IP that exists, which I almost always do, right? Having a working knowledge of the existing brand and intellectual property, so that you know how to tell the story that pops into your imagination. I think everybody really values that. From the shows I've worked on, Justice League Action was the first thing I worked on in animation for Alan Burnett and Jim Krieg and Butch Lukic. And, I think, they certainly valued that. And Lauren Faust, I worked with her on DC Superhero Girls, which is a really fun show. And I think I had some of the greatest time I've ever had concocting stories with Lauren and her team, to the movies I've worked on for people like, James Tucker and Butch Lukic, who I mentioned. The people who are doing this stuff, by the way, not even to mention Kevin Smith, Rob David from Mattel and Ted Biaselli at Netflix on Masters of the Universe, who, they want they're good at this. They're the reason why they are where they are in their career is because they are people who want to inspire creators and writers and artists to do their best work and use their imagination and then to help realize it. And that is, that's the real fun part of doing what I do. The frustrating part is when, I'm sitting here like right now, I've got a script open right now and I'm looking at that, oh gosh, you probably see it reflected in my glasses. I probably should. No, it's
spoilers, guys. Read the glasses.
It's a Teen Titans Academy script that I'm working on for my comics, and I'm in it, and I know what I want to do, and sometimes I get frustrated because I don't know what the next thing is and how this is going to tie together with the other thing to get to the point that I need to make in this issue. So, all the frustration like that can be really, can slow you down as a writer, but most of the time writers are crippled by the blank page.
Yes.
And that's not me. I see the blank page and I'm just like, okay, let's get going. For me, I freeze up when it's time to rewrite, when I'm going and I really agonize over what's the right thing to say here, what's the right thing to do here, and how do I reorder this thing. It's easy to just fill the page with words, but to actually make it a story and make the story make sense is the real job that we do.
I imagine that a lot of our listeners are probably either writers or wannabe writers, including myself, who is somewhere in the line between wannabe writer and a writer. So when you do get to that level of frustration or forgetting or not knowing how to go to the next point, how do you approach it? Because not only is it effective psychological on you probably thinking about how to go forward, but you also now have to actually do the hard work of constructing that bridge.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. There's a couple of different things. First, everybody's different, I think, but what I was taught, and one of the things I know a lot of my closest colleagues do, is we call each other, and we pitch things to each other. We take screenshots of screen grabs of pages that we're working on. We share them with each other. Sometimes it's when we think something we wrote is really great, and we just want to, to float it out there and see what our friends think. And sometimes it's just because it's like, I don't know how to do this thing. And, so we all do that with each other. And so that's one way to get out of that. The other thing is, there's two other things that I do. One is to just make a decision and be okay with it not being necessarily the right one. And what that frees you up to do is just put the thing, put a version of the thing down, the bad version. You give yourself permission to write the bad version all the time. And once you get that down, then you can try to go back and maybe you'll agonize over it. But chances are, once you put something down, it's going to shake something loose in your brain that when you go back to it and look at it later, you'll know how to. It's kind of mystical and mysterious in that way, but sometimes that's how it works. You just will know how to fix it then. The other great tool that we have that I use, and I know a lot of writers do, is I shut it all down. And I close out my brain and I don't think about it at all. Because one of the big things about writing that people don't understand, most people who aren't writers, who aren't creative people don't understand, is that we're writing all the time.
Yep.
And most of the writing takes place back in the back of our brain somewhere that we don't even know that we're thinking about what we're writing. It's all happening in a mysterious way. And when we sit back down again, more often than not, we figure out, we just know it's there. The way forward presents itself. And so shutting it all down and giving yourself permission to take a break from it for a little bit is a big part of it. For me, it's driving. If I can get in the car and drive for a while, there's something about being in the car driving that shuts off certain parts of my brain and activates other parts. Driving is, you get to a point where you've been driving long enough that a lot of it is instinctual. You're always aware of what's happening, but you have more space to listen to a podcast and think about what they're saying, or listen to music or sing along, or, there's other parts of your brain that get to be accessed. And so that's, for me, driving is an easy, quick, fast way to sort of clear my head. So yeah, for what it's worth, those are my suggestions.
I think that those are such great answers because, for one, I'm an English teacher for my day job. I always tell my students as they're writing their essays, I go, and I tell them, I go, it's not easy writing. It's never easy. Your first draft is going to suck. It just usually always does. But you need to get the idea on paper. Get the idea out there, and then you can go back and make it sound the way you want it to. But the idea needs to land. So write the crappy sentence first if you have to.
If I can give some unsolicited advice to your students, for me, the biggest and best piece of advice that I can give is that the greatest motivator is a deadline. And the more real you can make your deadlines feel to you, even if they're just internal deadlines that you've set for yourself, but if you can really make them feel real, and for me, it's usually because literally a production needs to start and we're going to lose a crew of artists if we don't have the pages, So it's a real world thing for me. But if you can have that deadline, it's amazing how much motivation it gives you. And what it has instilled in me, and this is the advice I would give, is, that there's almost never, and a lot of writers aren't like this, but I am almost never late on a deadline. I will, even if it's not perfect, I will turn in a finished product to you on the deadline, because it's important for me, I think, to adhere to those things. And to know that the thing is never going to be the perfect version. It's always just going to be the version that exists on the day that you have to deliver it. and so for somebody to come in and say, I'm not done with it yet. I'm going to miss my deadline. For me, that's just not a thing. I think, no, turn in what you got. Let's see where you are. And that it helps keep me motivated.
And it must also help focus you completely, because once again, you're realizing there is that end point. And I guess the moment you do skip a deadline and everything's okay, the deadline stops being real the next time, I imagine, as well.
That's exactly right. And of course, I talk a big game, but and I've got a visitor coming up right now to say hello to on the podcast, which is my cat just jumped onto my desk. I'm going to have to open the door and let him out of my office in a minute. So I don't even remember. We're talking about deadlines, but yeah, I don't know.
No worries.
I get distracted by cute cats. I can't help it. This is another great tool we have as writers. If I don't know what to do, I look at cat videos on the internet.
Well, I would say I have several cats and a dog, and yes, they often are a very convenient distraction when you're stuck on something and you don't get aggravated by it. So you're just like, the cat's right here. I probably got to pet the cat for a few minutes. And once again, as you're saying, it is funny how the brain of the writer works. There was a story just recently that I'm working on, a comic book, and I was stuck on a concept because the creator of the comic book changed the storyline that I wanted to tell, and he wanted a different storyline, plot line and whatnot. It's like, okay, I'll do whatever you want me to do because you're paying me. I don't care. And I was stuck on it for, I think, 2 whole days until I was just sitting there listening to my wife talk to her friends, and the idea just popped in my brain out of nowhere. I was like, that's the secret. And it's amazing how sometimes just that distraction allows your brain that relaxation where you don't even realize the gears are moving. It pops up with an actual concept.
Yeah, I think that's, I think everybody's different, but that speaks really, that's true for me, what you just said.
So the another story that you're working on, once again, as you complete our childhood, were you a fan of He-Man growing up?
Oh yeah. So I didn't play with the toys when I was a kid, which is such a huge part of Masters of the Universe and being a Masters of the Universe fan. But when I was a kid, I had to pick. We didn't have a lot of money, like I had to pick what was the thing that I was, and for me, Transformers just dominated my life. So, so I didn't get to play with the He-Man toys, but I watched the show. So that was, what I got was the old classic show. And so that was, really kind of the foundation for my work coming on Masters of the Universe. Although I have to say, in adult, I collect action figures and toys, and as an adult, I developed a pretty good working understanding of the toys. Although I never had a collection of Masters of the Universe stuff until I started working on Revelation.
Well, I will say I've been buying up the childhood toys of He-Man that I had growing up, and I've been buying them now on eBay and getting the collection back. So my wife is tolerant and allows me to showcase them around the house because she's a very tolerant woman, and I got lucky that she is.
Yes.
But for me, it was always He-Man. And the toys, when they came out, they were just cool looking. They're a cool set of toys. And the cartoon was just awesome. Looking back as an adult watching some of the cartoons, you're like, that's kind of cheesy here and there. But that sequence where he's getting, I have the power and the sword is up there, and that's one of the coolest freaking sequences in all of television.
Yeah, you can watch it over and over again,
Yes.
And you do when you watch that show. But yeah, there's I don't think you could grow up in the 80s, without being exposed to things like Masters of the Universe, which was the biggest thing in the world. Transformers was big. In a lot of ways, Masters of the Universe was even bigger. I wonder if it has anything to do with the fact that I grew up in Rhode Island, right where Hasbro was.
Yep.
That I gravitated toward the Hasbro property and not the Mattel property of Masters. But I don't know.
But go ahead.
But the people that I worked for on Revelation are some of the biggest Motu fans in the world. One of them works for Mattel now, and one of them works for Netflix. And so they're just like this, it's a strange confluence of events that those two ended up in the positions they're in. And they said, let's make a show.
Well, Well, for our listeners who may not realize what we're talking about, Tim Sheridan, he's writing, or one of the writers on Kevin Smith's new Netflix series coming out at some point. Was it, I think you said July, maybe? June, July?
There's no, they haven't announced when the show is going to come out. But what I have also had the good fortune to do is to work with Kevin and Rob David, one of our producers, one of the guys I told you about from Mattel, on a series of a 4-part miniseries for Dark Horse Comics, which is a prelude to the series that will debut on Netflix. That comic book begins in July, I think July. I want to say the first week in July, but I might be wrong. But yeah, that just got announced. So I know that that's happening, but it really doesn't give any indication about when the series is going to drop. So
for the listeners who are curious about the He-Man, once again, it's called Masters of the Universe Revelation. Does it start off with Prince Adam already He-Man, or is it what the comic books are going to be doing?
Let me just preface this by saying I try to stay out of the way. Kevin talks about the show from time to time, and because it's his show. He's the executive producer, and he's very, very generous with the amount of information he shares with everyone. And but I try to be really cautious about it until they sort of take the leash off of me. But based on the stuff that I've heard him say, I can say this: the series, the way Kevin looked at it and the way we came into it was that the series would be it would feel like a natural continuation. It would feel like it was connected to the classic era of Masters of the Universe.
Does the She-Ra mythology exist within it as well? Like Skeletor was a student of Hordad, that kind of thing? Or is He-Man and She-Ra going to be two separate existing entities for the series?
That's a question for Mattel. I think that my understanding is that there's complicated ways in which sort of the animation rights to those properties all mingle and work together. So I can't speak to any of that. So that's but I know for me, you don't for speaking personally as a fan, you don't have one without the other. Those things are whether I see it on screen or not, those things are connected and a part of each other.
Cause it feels like He-Man is another one of those series, like Transformers was growing up, that the mythology evolved over time. Like it started off just being a show, but over the years they created a mythology using the characters. It kind of grew, became a little more complex, at least for what the cartoons were back in the day.
Well, yeah, I mean, even in the classic days of when the toys, when the cartoon was around, there were evolutions of the stories of, like, the origins of Skeletor, and there were lots of different sort of conflicting narratives and versions back then. I think there were a few, at least.
Yeah.
And so, like, this is kind of like what we were saying earlier about Transformers. I think when the benefit is that when something is as popular as Masters of the Universe is, over time, all of the different sort of voices that have lent themselves to the canon, the bits and pieces that the fans really, gravitate to and feel something about, end up becoming part of the lexicon and part of the canon going forward. And then sometimes some of that stuff sort of falls to the wayside, and you get to come along and do another show, and maybe, if you're lucky, or do some comics, and maybe if you're lucky, you can pick up some of the threads, that maybe haven't been explored as much, in other media. So, I think that my point is to say that the great legacy of brands and things, properties like Masters of the Universe, is that there's a lot to draw upon, and a lot of great stuff to draw upon. So it really makes it, my job a lot easier. I went into every day that we were in the writer's room on Masters of the Universe Revelation. I walked in with my giant, Masters of the Universe character guide, and compendium, world compendium. It had all the because as much of a fan as you are, with something like Masters of the Universe, I don't think there's anybody who can tell you with exact certainty every single version of a thing that has happened throughout the history of the property, of the story as it's evolved. So I love that reference guide. I love being able to flip to a page and say, well, this character, we know we've got a character who does this thing. I seem to remember there was a character who did something like that in the mini comics. So let me look that up, and we do, and then we're like, okay, well, this character in the show is going to be this person who is, someone with a pedigree in the world in the story of Masters of the Universe. That's, again, it makes my job a lot easier, because I can say, oh, well, this already is a thing.
Right.
Let's mine it and use it for this story, But again, I'm just a writer on the show. Like, this is the stuff that Kevin, and our other producers, really make the decisions on.
So when they were talking to you about making the show, do they give you an intended audience or age group that the show is supposed to be gravitating towards or be written towards?
Yeah, pretty much every project I've ever gone into, I've known what the audience, the projected audience would be for that thing. And, that's pretty standard. I mean, it's important for somebody like me who, I've written things like, I was saying DC superhero girls earlier. I've written Scooby-Doo movies, but I've also written, movies like Reign of the Supermen and Man of Tomorrow, which were more adult in their sort of nature in terms of the themes that they explored, and some of the imagery that was used in the movies, than what you would necessarily get in a Scooby-Doo movie. So in something like, Masters of the Universe, there are two Masters of the Universe shows at Netflix. There's our show, which we always knew was a show for all ages, but that would appeal to the adult fans who grew up with the classic, He-Man story. And then there's another show that is, really about sort of, I think, developing the next generation of Masters of the Universe heroes, of He-Man, of Masters of the Universe fans, of He-Man fans. And that's it's amazing that Mattel is able to do that Netflix is doing that with them. I think it's a great time to be a fan right now.
And, because you're writing Masters of the Universe for a slightly older audience as well, or at least you want adults to be able to enjoy it. Something that kids didn't really think about too much when we were watching the cartoons originally is what I call the Prince Adam problem. Prince Adam and He-Man look exactly the same, but yet no one can tell the difference. I mean, like I said, I think He-Man has a slightly darker hair. His skin looks like he has a tan. But for the most part, even the build of these two characters is exactly the same. I mean, he's a pretty built Prince Adam. How do you guys solve it in the He-Man cartoon?
I don't understand. What are you saying? You're saying Prince Adam and He-Man are the same person?
Yes. It's a shocking reveal, isn't it?
Listen, I've heard some crazy internet conspiracy theories, but I have never heard anything like that.
The paparazzi are like shocked, and they're like, "What the hell?"
Hey, listen, man, you're talking to somebody who wrote a couple of Superman movies. Like Superman. We try to have fun with it, sometimes where it's like, what? He just puts on glasses, maybe changes the hair part, a little bit, and nobody really can figure this out.
But compared to Prince Adam, though, that's high tech identity change compared to what Prince Adam's got going on.
Yeah, but I will say the difference, and again, let me again preface by saying this is just me talking to you as a fan. You should not in any way think that this leads or points to anything that would exist in the series or in the comics. But personally, as a fan, I would say that if I was going to make an argument about this, I would say that Superman doesn't call down any sort of magical power that changes him. So it's a little bit of a tougher sell with him, but where there's magic involved, I feel like it's possible that those around you may have something that I think in Doctor Who they refer to as a perception filter, right? There's the idea that maybe with magic all things are possible, and maybe people can't see through the power to see that He-Man is Prince Adam. Again, this is just me wild speculating as a fan, but I think that's a pretty good argument, right?
No, you did very good. That's a very good possibility right there.
Well, let me say this. And the reason why this is fresh in my mind is because I'm also right now I'm doing some stuff for DC Comics, and I'm doing a thing called Teen Titans Academy, a monthly book, and then it just was announced I'm also doing a 4-part Shazam comic book miniseries, and it ties into Teen Titans Academy. But when they announced that I was doing the Shazam book, and then the next day the announcement came out from Dark Horse that I was doing the Masters of the Universe book. And it was really ironic and funny. I was just like, I put out a tweet. I said, in addition to the 4-part comic book miniseries about the young guy who calls down incredible power to become a mighty hero, starting in July, I have a 4-part comic book miniseries about a young guy who calls down great power to become a mighty hero. So for me, there is so much similarity between Billy Batson and Prince Adam, He-Man and Shazam, because those guys both call down this magical power so they can become something else. So they become something bigger, something greater, something super. And but nobody asks that question about Billy Batson, because he's very clearly a young kid who grows. He grows to be a man in his prime when he's Shazam, right? So nobody ever says, well, how come nobody makes the connection between them? I think the 2000 series, the 2000X series of Masters of the Universe, they played with the Shazam of it a little bit, didn't they? They had
a younger, Adam, he was a thin Adam, and he turned into a massive. Younger.
He looked younger, and then he looked older and much bigger as He-Man. So that was an interesting way to do it. I think it was smart, of them to do that.
And and I find it kind of funny that in the cartoon you have Cringer growing to massive size to become Battle Cat when he gets the power sword. But He-Man doesn't even grow a couple of inches. You figure, at least give him the guy a little bit of extra height, to make it work for him. But get like a longer hair or something.
I just keep pitching to give Prince Adam glasses. That's it.
So not only do you write our childhood, but you write every super character with super strong character is also your thing.
They all have glasses. I'm going to give, you heard it here first. I'm going to give Billy Batson glasses. That's what I'm going to do.
How about Optimus Prime? You could use a pair. You never know. He's kind of old.
Absolutely. Optimus Prime's getting glasses. People are going to be wondering, what's he hiding?
Well, I mean, the cool thing as well with He-Man is that they announced the voice actors. And it's a hell of a group. I mean, you got Mark
Oh.
Hamill. You got, I think it's
Yeah.
Oppenheimer, Alan Oppenheimer. You have basically every name in, I think Kevin Conroy is a role in that as well. Like
Kevin
every
Conroy plays Merman. Yes.
Yes.
Diedrich Bader is King Randor. Yeah. It's
like every major voice actor of the last 20, 30 years is going to be in your cartoon in He-Man. So when you're writing the series, did you already know, and did you already know who the voices were, and did that affect how you wrote them?
I don't think at the when we first started, I don't think we knew any of that. That hadn't been determined yet. And it also is the kind of thing that normally is not, part of what I do. Normally, my work is done, and then the thing gets cast. And if I have an opportunity as a writer to suggest, like, this is the type of sound, this is the type of actor that we would, that we could look for this type of role. But they don't have to listen to me. It's just me sort of trying to help people along. I mean, to understand sort of, what I think the story needs are. But no, I remember. I'm glad you asked this, because I do remember I was in the middle of writing an episode of Masters of the Universe Revelation. And when I got the word that we were going to get, I'm going to pronounce her name wrong. And I hope maybe you know how to pronounce her name, but that we were going to get Lena Headey or Headey. Headey? I think it's.
Well, if anyone's wondering, it's the one from Game of Thrones. I cannot pronounce it probably correctly.
Played Cersei on Game of Thrones. I know her from the Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Oh, yes.
That was my first exposure to her, and found her to be, and I'm embarrassed that I can't pronounce her name right. I found her to be one of the most engaging and interesting actors I had ever seen on television when I saw her on Sarah Connor Chronicles back in the day. And then when she showed up on Game of Thrones, I said, yes, of course. This person is a genius. I can't wait. And then that show was crazy, and she was wonderful. So the day I heard that we had gotten Lena as Eva Lynn, I went immediately to my computer and rewrote all of Eva Lynn's dialogue.
Yeah.
And in that episode, and it was because, and the reason I'm telling you this is because sometimes the inspiration for something comes from, it can come from all sorts of different places. In that situation, for me, because I had an understanding and appreciation, I felt as a fan of hers, of what Lena could bring to that role, it completely, immediately changed how that character sounded in my head. And I could not wait to get in and refine dialogue for her and make it sound the way that I could hear Lena doing it in my head. And it just elevated, if I may say so, I think it elevated everything.
Yeah.
In such a huge way. And that's the power of being able to, when you do a show with Kevin Smith for Netflix with huge iconic characters like from Masters of the Universe, when you can attract talent of that caliber at that level, who not only bring their A game plus when they come to the record, which by the way she did, and so did the whole cast, but when they also can inspire the writers and the production team and the artists and everyone, because of their body of work up to that point, if that can inspire the creators to get, make it even better, or to get through whatever that sort of writer's block or artist block moment they're having or whatever, that's an incredible gift. And it's in that particular moment, on that particular show on Masters of the Universe, I was so grateful that day when I got that call about Lena, because it changed everything for me. And I think people will really take to her performance and in a big way, because I think everyone on the whole production felt that we had, between her and Mark Hamill, and Chris Wood and Sarah Michelle Gellar, we just had such inspirational, amazing artists who we knew we could trust to just make the whole thing sing. And I've seen a little bit of the show, and I humbly submit that, this is one of the best casts you're going to see in a series anytime soon.
I mean, the cast is absolutely amazing. I mean, Phil Lamar is playing Hero. I mean, there's so many amazing actors in this, and I mean, and I think it's really cool that when you found out who Evil was playing Evil Lynn, you changed the dialogue to fit in, to make it sing for the actress who's going to be doing it. And
well, can I stop you for a second and just say,
Spaghetti! And we're back.
That's right. We are back. Back in the saddle again. Well, I hope you guys really, really enjoyed that as much as we did making it for you. And if you like what you heard and you want to hear more, you got to go check out spoilerverse.com, because at spoilerverse.com, we have a plethora amazing directors and artists of all walks of life, and editors and writers. And oh my God, are you a lover of comic books like we are? Then there's so many amazing people from the comic book world over at spoilerverse.com. And I highly implore you to go there and check it out.
Yeah, and while you're there, you can check out all the other podcasts on our network, like Bridges and Geekdoms and Funny Book Forensics and Haphazard Adventures and Nerds from the Crypt and so many more.
Misery
We put out
Point
episodes
Radio.
all the time. Go check all of them out. And check out all of the reviews and previews and articles we have going up every single day for you. Every day on spoilerverse.com for you to check out and to read and to love and to like and to comment. We have a store link. If you want to help support the site, you can do it two ways. One, go to our Patreon, which is patreon.com/spoilercountry, or go to our store link in the middle of the site there and get a t-shirt, a face mask, a hoodie, something, look fly as hell, and help support the site when you do that, because we get $1 or $2. And, maybe you want to talk to us. If you do, you can do it obviously on all the socials, but if you go to scpod.us/Discord, you can join our public Discord server and come chat with us all day long.
I couldn't say it better myself, dude.
There you go.
You just mouthed out a ton of information at once. And really, I hope you guys enjoy what you're hearing, because we're working our butts off to bring it to you.
We are.
I guess there's only one left thing. One left thing? Yeah, I'm going to go with it. There's only one left thing left to do.
What's that?
In an oceans of podcasts,
We are Cthulhu.
as Cthulhu compels you to
Spaghetti! Open the mind.
and read more.
Spaghetti!